Well, it's 12 o'clock. Let's go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for coming today, everyone. Thanks for joining us for the DataMaster webinar. I'm going to turn things over to Marty Hamilton, who will introduce himself, and Jared, our speaker. Thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Tammy. So my name is Marty Hamilton. I'm the Director of Sales and Marketing at DataMaster. And I'm super excited today to have Jared with us. Jared is our Chief Appraiser. And I want to read his bio so I don't leave anything out because it's pretty impressive. So here it is. Over the past 27 years, Jared Preisler has completed almost 24,000 appraisal assignments. He's still a practicing independent fee appraiser in Northern Utah. He's also the Chief Appraiser at DataMaster. Jared has earned 2 designations from the Appraisal Institute, SRA and AIRRS. In 2014, he was certified as a national instructor for the Appraisal Institute. In 2018, he became an AQB certified USPAP instructor. His industry leadership extends to the Directors Board of the Utah chapter of the Appraisal Institute, where he served previously as President, Vice President, Education Chair, and Government Relations Chair. Additionally, since 2010, Jared has served as a Board of Trustee member and current Vice President of the Utah Association of Appraisers. Jared's dedication to education is evident through the development of numerous continuing education courses for the real estate profession. Leveraging his roles at UAA, the Utah chapter of the Appraisal Institute, and as Chief Appraiser for DataMaster, he continues to contribute significantly to professional development. Before entering the appraisal field, Jared earned a Bachelor of Science degree from Weber State University. His diverse background includes ownership of a remodeling and construction company, a home inspection company, and he owned 64 rental properties. In his personal life, Jared finds joy in family moments with his wife, Lisa, their 5 children, and 3 grandchildren. He loves watching their kids play sports, traveling with Lisa, cycling, and golf. So now that you know a little bit more about Jared, I'm going to turn the time over to him. This presentation that we've got is for all of you to work with, to be able to present to non-appraisers and to gather leads. And this is actually what Jared has used himself. And so he's kind of giving you a peek behind the curtain at his secret sauce, if I can mix metaphors right now. These are some of the resources that he uses. So Jared, thanks for being here, and go ahead.
Yeah, so welcome everyone. Looks like we've got quite a good turnout. Thank you for coming. I'll tell you a little bit about how this all got started. We were sitting around late last year at DataMaster, and we were trying to think of some of the things that we could do to help appraisers. We know that there are several different pain points that you have, and one of the biggest ones right now is just the lack of business. We know that you're struggling a little bit, that where your work is coming from is changing, and that and so we thought, what are some things that we could do to help you increase your business? So today we're not going to really talk too much about DataMaster as a product. We do have an offer, because you joined us today, that Marty's going to make towards the very end. But really today is more focused on how we can help you build your business. And I appreciate the introduction by Marty. What I think as he starts reading down through that is that I'm just really super old. There's a lot of things on there. I am passionate about this profession, and have had some great opportunities to be able to share and to participate in our profession. So here's a couple of things. One of the things that I find very useful, and it really doesn't matter if you're in Utah where I am, or your neck of the woods. This works across the country, and is one of the things that I do whenever my business gets a little bit slow, or I also have a regular cadence where I go and visit with certain loan officers and brokers, real estate offices, brokerages. And it started out kind of small, where I would put myself out there and say, I'd love to come and share with you some of the changes that are happening in the appraisal industry. Do you have a 20-minute slot that I could come and speak to your loan officers or to your real estate agents? This also works a little bit for attorneys as well. The end is not really geared towards attorneys. It's geared more towards loan officers and brokers. And over the time, I've developed a reputation, a relationship with them, to where I present very good factual data, factual points. And now a lot of times those brokers will seek me out and say, I have an open spot, could you come? On a regular basis, I'm probably in 2 to 3 offices each month, and I carve out some time and I try to be in front of them. Now, you might be asking to yourself, well, why, Jared, do you go to a loan officer or a lender's office? Because you're not on their, maybe you're not on their their AMC panel, or they can't give you direct work. Why are you still marketing to them? I will tell you that every good loan officer and every good real estate agent has a Rolodex that is 4 or 5 times as big as your Rolodex. And in many times, they're going to be 100 times bigger and better than your Rolodex. They know people who come to them, view them as experts, and value their advice, who maybe need to have an appraisal done for an estate settlement. Maybe grandma and grandpa just passed away, and they need to have that property appraised for an estate settlement, or to establish a date of death, a value. They maybe know somebody that they sold a house to 5 or 6 years ago, and unfortunately things have changed and they're getting a divorce now, or there's some other kind of non-lender work. And so I market to them because I do a lot of their non-lender or non-real estate based work. One of the other things that I get from this presentation is some other services that I like to provide. I do consulting services where I charge on an hourly basis to help price properties, or on an hourly basis to help them price a particular feature. Maybe it's very odd to have a swimming pool in an area, and they're listing a property with a swimming pool, and they need to know how much to add for that swimming pool. They don't necessarily want to pay you for a full appraisal, but they're happy to pay you $75, $100 an hour, $150 for a survey or for a study, a specific study. Sketching services. I do a lot of sketches for real estate agents, so that they know, especially with the changes that came about with the ANSI standards a little over a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago now. Doesn't seem like it's been that long, but it has been. And so this opens up the door for a lot of those other services. And so one of the challenges, though, that you're going to have is, what do you say when you get there? We're going to provide you today with a list. I've been gathering for about 10 years, a list of questions that are asked of me when I go and present. And we boiled it down to, I think, Marty, there's 30 questions that we boiled it down to. I think it was originally somewhere around 40 or 50. And we put them in different categories. And you're going to get a copy of that today. And those are the things that I would look for. I would prep myself before I go in. I'll just quickly glance through that list and say, these are the things that might be asked of me today. So we're going to give you that list. We're going to give you a copy of this PowerPoint presentation. You can go in and change it for yourself. You can, add the logo of your company on it. The things that I'm going to show you here today are not copyrighted. They're things that you have access to, and you may want to tweak it a little bit for your presentation style. I suggest that as we get going, that you take notes. You're going to present slightly different than I do, and I'm going to present it and show you kind of the key features that are with each of these slides, and then I want you to take those notes. You're also going to get my information, and if you have questions later, I'm happy to take a call and help you out that way as well.
And
So,
Jared,
yeah,
real quick. So this list of questions that we're going to give to you, it also has a separate section for notes on those. So I know one of the ways that you've used it in the past is to make copies of it and pass those out to the participants that you're presenting to, so that they can take notes on it as well. And that way they have a little leave behind from you who to contact you again later and to remind them of why they, or where it came from, and what they were thinking when they got it too. So I'm going to put that in the chat right now.
Great. Absolutely, Marty. So this is really, I use it as my business card. So I put my little information down on the bottom. I make copies of it. I usually do it on a little bit heavier, not necessarily cardstock, but a little heavier paper. And then they can, then just like Marty said, they can take some notes while I'm presenting. And most of them won't throw these things away. It's big enough. It's a full-size sheet of paper. And I'll go into their office a month later and it'll still be sitting on their desk, and they'll have added new notes on it. And they have my phone number right there. So it's very sticky, and it keeps them. So those are the things that that I find work. And so we really, once I present this, inevitably, within about 2 weeks after me doing the presentation, I will get anywhere from 4 to 8 assignments or opportunities for me to bill and to increase my business immediately after presenting this type of thing. I will tell you that there's appraisers in my area that really don't appreciate some of the things that are in these slides. I'll tell you that they're fundamentally sound, and if you're teaching this type of content to the agents and the loan officers, you're going to gain that credibility. And so let's get started with the slides. And are there any other questions that maybe have come up as we're getting started here? But hopefully this will be a real, I want to give you some real good content here. So take notes and get ready. So I'll usually call the broker to schedule a broker's meeting. I want to be the last one to present. So that's the ideal spot for me. Sometimes it doesn't work that way. But I show up 15 to 20 minutes before they're going to present, before their meeting starts. And I'll just hang out in the back, and they'll do, a lot of brokers have kind of a routine of what they do in these brokers meetings, but I like to be the last one. That way, if somebody has a meeting that they need to get to, they can scoot. But if there's a lot of questions, then inevitably the 20, 30 minutes becomes 40 minutes, 60 minutes. I don't schedule anything for 120 minutes after the meeting's supposed to end. I don't want to be rushing off to something. You finally have got in front of some folks that can give you some business, and you don't want to have a deadline that you've got to get out of. So those are just a couple of housekeeping things that I like to do when I'm scheduling. So in this presentation, there's going to be several different components. Usually there's a little introduction, and you can do it the way that Marty and I did today. I write up a little bio and I'll give it to the broker, and that broker will introduce me. And then I'll get into the slide. I make sure that they've got a place where I can present this. But the first thing after I've introduced myself that I like to talk about is communication. So communication between the agents, the appraisers, and the property owner is critical. A lot of brokers have heard that they can't talk to you, or homeowners that they can't talk to you. And that's just not true. There's nothing in any of the legislation, the federal laws, or anywhere that says that you can't talk to a real estate agent or the homeowner. What they can't do is pressure you, and that becomes a really good topic, is on appraisal independence. And I actually have another PowerPoint on appraisal independence that I like to share if I've already presented this one before. But it's critical for you to be able to talk to that agent and understand how they price the property. Here's some of those questions that I might ask of a property owner or the agent. How'd you price the property? What's the listing history? Tell me about your days on market. How many showings did you have? What happened at your open house? What can you tell me about the property site? What are the things that were most important? What are the improvements that have been made? Specifically, was there some remodeling that folks liked that maybe I need to be aware of? Are there any new energy efficient items that you can tell me about? If we're talking about the specifics of the property and how it was marketed and how it was priced, those are key things that I need to understand from the brokers. And you'll get a lot of heads that start nodding and go, okay, that makes sense. And I would hope that as kind of a side note here, that if a broker left a packet for you on the countertop, their listing packet, maybe it's got their CMA in it and some glossy photos of the property, a list of key features, that you would take that with you. They've gone to a lot of effort to do that. It just becomes one of those pieces of data that you put in your work file. Maybe there's some key information there. It's not necessarily that they're trying to direct you into a particular price, a particular value, but they're just sharing with you some information. When we get down a little bit later into what the definition of market value is, how they price the property is very important. So I just kind of go through this and say, we can talk. You can talk to me. You just can't say, Jared, if you don't hit this value, I'm going to get you blacklisted from the AMC, or I'm never going to use you again. I'm going to create all kinds of havoc for you on your Instagram account. Those kind of things are not appropriate, and we cannot talk about those. We can't talk about predetermined values, and you guys know that. I'm not telling you anything different, but this is where I like to start with this office. The next thing I do is I put in a little bit of market update. Now, you can get these from your MLS. You can get these from your study. If you're doing a particular area, just replace this slide with a couple of slides and talk about the number of active listings that have been happening, or maybe what's going on, the days on market. Something very simple so that they know that you kind of know what's going on with the market. These slides, don't use these slides. These slides are demo slides. I don't even know where these came from. But put in a couple of slides on a quick market update. Don't get in the weeds and spend a lot of time there, but show them that you know how to do a little bit of market analysis. And then the next section, this is where I probably spend the bulk of my time in that 20 to 30 minute presentation. And that's in this valuation process. A lot of them don't know how we value properties. They've had an appraisal class as part of their training, but it probably was a very small part, and they really don't understand what the difference is. And so the first thing I do is, many of you will recognize this. This is from the 15-hour USPAP class. I'll show them this. I'll say, this is the steps and process that an appraiser has to go through. And I'm just going to break down each of the steps really quick. And it will help them to understand, especially a loan officer when you're presenting it there, why you might not be able to do something that they want you to do. So first, I talk about the first step in the appraisal process. I have to define the problem. I identify who my client and intended users are. What's the intended use of the report? What's the definition of market value that we're going to use? What's the effective date? We have to identify the relevant characteristics of the property. That's where talking to the agent or looking at the MLS listing, county records, that's where that becomes very, very helpful. And then, are there any extraordinary or hypothetical conditions that I need to deal with? Once I've defined the problem, so here's where I stop for a second and I'll talk about FHA conventional, where maybe you've got a lender that just said, hey, can you just switch that from FHA to conventional or conventional to FHA? Well, I really can't, because I identified in the very beginning that FHA was my intended client, and the use was for an FHA to secure the an FHA mortgage to insure an FHA mortgage. And now you're telling me that we're completely changing my client, my intended use, and my intended users. And so I have to start the process all over again. And that really helps them in understanding that, and why maybe a listing appraisal can't be used for the loan, because we have different intended users and different intended uses. The definition might be the same, the effective date might not change, but other parts of this defining the problem changed. So the next thing is, once I know what that problem is, now I build the scope of work. For example, if it's FHA, I got to get in the attic and the crawl space if there happens to be one. If it was conventional, I might not have had to do that. Those are all the components of scope of work that as an appraiser, I'm responsible for developing, and for so that I can make sure that I develop a credible opinion. So once I show them that, then the next part is data collection and analysis. Now I'm going to get into my market analysis. I'm going to look at how this property that I already know about these relevant characteristics and properties and who my client is. Now I know where to go and do my market analysis. I do my highest and best use analysis, the site as a vacant, the ideal improvement, and then as improved currently. And so you can get into and tell some stories here about some different things. So I have a really good story that I like to tell that that highlights this data collection. We had a property that we were doing an appraisal on not too long ago that was supposed to be for a loan for non-owner occupied buyer who wanted me to also do a rent analysis and an operating income statement. So this was a condo townhome project. And so as we were in our initial phase of doing the step one, we called the homeowners association and asked if they had any rental properties in the project, because I knew that this was going to be one of the challenges that I was going to have in fulfilling this assignment. They told me that there were none because it was not allowed to rent any of these units. They all had to be owner occupied. Well, all of a sudden my market analysis changes, my highest and best use analysis changes. I had to go back to the client and say, I can't do what you've asked me to do because this property can't be rented there legally. And they were very grateful. They paid me for the time that I had spent up through the highest and best use analysis. And about 2 weeks later, we got another assignment, same borrower's name, different project where rentals were available, and we were able to complete that assignment. That's a story that I like to share. You come up with your own stories, instances in which you've had some experiences where maybe the market analysis made a big difference, or highest and best use analysis where you had some key insights into that. But insert some personal stories into here, and that will go a long way in helping them understand how complex this process may be. So once we've got the data collection, now we can start analyzing that, and we can figure out which approach to value is appropriate. We have to consider all three. So I let them know that there's three approaches to value: cost approach, sales comparison, and income approach. Fannie and Freddie will only lend on the sales comparison approach, but USPAP requires me to consider all three approaches. And so I'll let them know that, you may have a brand new construction where somebody has gone way out and beyond and added a lot of personalized things that the market just doesn't find the same value in. And even though the cost of that may be way different than what the sales comparison approach is saying, for Fannie and Freddie, they only lend on the sales comparison approach. This is a helpful time here to kind of get into that. And in a minute, we're going to actually go into what the difference between price, cost, and value is. And the agents, the brokers really like that discussion. Again, you could tell some stories right here as well. Once we've done each of the approaches to value, we finish those up, then we reconcile not only each of the individual approaches to value, but the final value. That's what I'm required to do. And then we write the report. And I usually tell them this. I said, in reality, I start writing the report from the very beginning. I don't wait until the very end to write the report. It's being written along the way, but my final step is to review everything, make sure that it's readable, that the conclusion that I came up with is very well defined, and any reader of the report would come to the same conclusion. And so that's really the appraisal process. It's quite lengthy. So when you say, hey, can you just go do a listing appraisal and how cheap can I get that? I have to go through this extensive 6-step process here. And that really helps them understand your value and where you're spending a lot of your time. So then I transition to this next step. And I say, we're going to talk really quick here about the difference between price, cost, and value. And the way that I've laid this out, I think you'll find very useful. First, we have this definition of price that's come out of one of the online Webster dictionaries, where it says price is the amount of money expected, required, or given in payment for something. It's the amount of money needed to persuade somebody to do something. And then here's the definition from the Appraisal of Real Estate 15th edition. It says price, the amount a particular purchaser agrees to pay and a particular seller agrees to accept under the circumstances surrounding their transaction. Price is an accomplished fact. And they're like, okay, I kind of understand that. Then we look at cost, the same thing. Here's the definition from the Webster's Online. And then here's from the 15th edition of Real Estate. It's the total dollar expended for an improvement structure, applies to production, not exchange. Appraisers distinguish among direct or hard cost, indirect cost, and the cost of entrepreneurial coordination. So I stop here for a minute and explain that cost is on the production side of the improvements, of putting the property together, where price deals with the exchange. What are we exchanging? What's been built for? And that all of a sudden, I really love this definition because it helps kind of put those two in context. And then the next thing we say is value. So value can be a lot of different things. Goods, services, money, consideration to be fair and a suitable equivalent for something else, a fair price or return. This number 3, the importance of maybe the value of education. It doesn't necessarily have to be monetary. It could be I've traded some time for the value of my education. And then the pattern here again, we're going to get what value, the definition of value from the 15th edition of Real Estate. Value represents the monetary worth of a property, goods or services to buyers and sellers at a given time. So that's where our effective date comes in. And I'll say it just like that. This is how our effective date comes in. It's the present worth of future benefits that accrue or result from real property ownership. And then I might talk about those future benefits as part of the bundle of rights that we value and why it's important when we're selecting comparables that they have the same bundle of rights or the same highest and best use or the same zoning, that they have the same characteristics, because that's one of the components of the definition of value. So then we go on a little bit further. The definition continues and says, for appraisers, the term value can be misleading. The term value alone can be misleading. Appraisers typically refer to a particular type of value rather than just use the word value alone. Market value, use value, investment value, assessed value. And so for us, it's not just value. And most of those that are listening to this from you that are listening are going to say, okay, I appreciate that. I understand that a little bit better now. And then I kind of switch because my audience at this point is going to be real estate agents and loan officers mostly. I'm going to say, now the definition of market value that we really care most about is the one that is used by the GSEs, Fannie and Freddie. Because when I'm doing an appraisal for a purchase, or refinance, that's the value definition that I have to do my assignment to. That's part of that scope of work. It's part of the intended users. And so then I want to talk really quick about the 5 components that are part of the definition of market value that you sign your signature to every time you do an appraisal. So here's what the definition says. Market value is the most probable price which a property should bring in a competitive and open market under all conditions requisite to a fair sale. The buyer and seller each acting prudently, knowledgeably, and assuming that the price is not affected by undue stimulus. And then there's these 5 things. Oh, implicit in the definition is the consummation of a sale as of a specific date and the passing of title from seller to buyer under conditions. These 5 conditions. So number 1, buyers and sellers are typically motivated. Number 2, both parties are well informed, well advised, and acting in what he or she considers their own best interest. Number 3, a reasonable time's allowed for exposure in the open market. Number 4, payments made in terms of US dollars or in terms of financial arrangements comparable thereto. And finally, the price represents normal consideration for the property sold unaffected by special or creative financing or sales concessions granted by anyone associated with the sale. So I then will talk a little bit about each of these. I've had cases where both parties were not well informed. But let's start with number 1. If I have let's say I have grandma and grandpa selling the property to their grandson or granddaughter. They may not be equally or typically motivated by someone else, in another situation. So this non-arm's length transaction doesn't meet this component of market value. Now, it doesn't mean that the price that they agreed to is not market value, but it just means that I can't rely on that purchase contract as a component of market value. Some other cases may be where, the listing agent, when I called them and said, how did you price this property? They said, well, the sellers, they had this mortgage that was pretty high and they needed to pay me my commissions. And then they also wanted enough down payment for their new house. And so we added all of those up and then we added about 10%. And then that's how we priced it. Okay. Were they well informed about what the market price should have been? Was a CMA done to price that property? So if that was the case, then guess what? Number 2 doesn't apply. I can't really rely on that list price or that purchase price as a component of market value by definition, because both parties were not well advised or well informed. I have a great little story that I like to insert here from a couple that were moving from Utah County in Utah, which is south of Salt Lake. If you're familiar with south of the Wasatch Front, we have kind of the Idaho is on the north, and then there's Box Elder County, Weber County, Davis, Salt Lake in Utah County. Some of you may have heard of BYU, the Brigham Young University. That's in the southern end of the Wasatch Front in Provo, Utah County. And their son had a medical condition, and they needed to move to a different elevation. So they had made an offer on a property that was well north within this elevation zone for their son's medical condition. And as I was doing the appraisal, the listing agent had not done a CMA and had just thrown a price out there. And actually, the backyard neighbor, who was the exact identical property, had sold 3 weeks earlier from pricing the property for about $150,000 less. And the listing agent had not considered that sale as part of their pricing. Well, the buyer's agent told me that they made an offer on the property based on if it had been located in Utah County, which was a very, very different market, about 120 miles away, in a market where this property, if it had been in 120 miles to the south, would have certainly garnered the price or create, been well worth the price that they had offered. But so in this case, neither the listing agent nor the buyer's agent were well informed and did not well advise either one of their parties. And so number two was completely not appropriate, or not, not something to be considered. In my report, my report was obviously lower than purchase price in this case, but I commented and said, here's why purchase price doesn't meet the definition of market value. These two things did not happen in this purchase contract price. Number one, the sellers were more motivated because of the situation that they were in than a typical buyer would be motivated. And number two, nobody was well informed. But I documented that within my report. These other three, I can go through pretty quick with them. Exposure time, we're required to develop an exposure time per USPAP and put that in each of our reports so that we can benchmark the subject's analysis, the analysis of the purchase contract against that. And I also might give a little story about sales concessions as well. My market, I'm in a non-disclosure state, and so concessions are a little bit different. You work out how you're going to present the sales concession side on your own, relevant to your market. So I said, let's look at this visually, okay? So here we have typically motivated buyers and sellers. We have well-informed buyers and sellers. We have a reasonable exposure time that's occurred. We have this terms of US dollars, and we have no creative financing. And somewhere in the middle where all of these meet is where market value is. If one of them hasn't been met, then I really don't have market value until we can get them well informed or wherever it may be. This visual representation is really one that goes a long way to helping to understand this concept of market value. And so then I say to them, here's my free advice for the day. When your purchase price is different than the opinion of value the appraiser's opinion of value, maybe it's $5,000, $10,000, $30,000 lower than the purchase price. Rather than just throw some additional comparables at the appraiser in a reconsideration of value, ask them this simple question. Ask the appraiser through their lender in the appropriate chain of, the appropriate way that it's supposed to be done. Ask them this simple question. And then I say, oh, I'm not going to show you the question yet. I'm going to show it to you at the very end. So then I take just a second and I talk to them about what's comparable. What is a comparable? Because many of them, they may have just searched for a list price and said, oh, we want to get this list price, so all the other properties priced within that same listing are comparable. But that's not what Fannie Mae tells us. That's not what our guidelines, our standards tell us. Fannie Mae uses the word competing properties to describe comparables. Appraisers are responsible, and this is right from the selling guide. Appraisers are responsible for determining which comparables are best and most appropriate for the assignment. They should have similar physical and legal characteristics when compared to the subject. They include things like site size, room count, gross living area, style, condition. And you can add to this list if you want to, things that you may be comfortable putting, but this is actually the list from the selling guide. It doesn't mean that the comparable has to be identical to the subject property, but it should be competitive in appeal. So we talk a little bit about that. I talk about some of the things that I might ask when I'm looking at the relevant characteristics. Was it horse property? Does it have surplus or excess land? Is it on a busy street? Are there power lines? Does a buyer need to, does a typical buyer need to have some financing help, FHA, VA, those kind of things. So I'll go through that slide a little bit. And then I'll come back to this same question. What is it, the question that I want them to ask their appraiser when the definition or when the opinion of value doesn't meet the purchase price is this question. What is it about my transaction that doesn't meet your definition of market value? I had typically motivated buyers and sellers. They were all well informed. We were on the market for a reasonable amount of time. We had a full price offer. There was no creative financing. What is it about my transaction that doesn't meet these 5 things? And as an appraiser, if your opinion of value is different than purchase price, the easiest way for you to support that and to communicate that is to tell which part of this was not met and anchor it back to that definition that you signed. Now, some of you may not be comfortable with that. I know a lot of appraisers that are really lazy in my area, and they hate it when I make this presentation because they don't do any of this. And, I'm okay with that because they're not the guys or gals that I want to compete against. They're not building a business that's going to be good for the profession. And I'll get pretty bold about that. And if you have some more questions about how I handle it, I'd be happy to take it offline. So that's the presentation that we're going to give you. It's going to end with that particular point. And I'm open. We've got about 15 minutes left for any questions that maybe you have about the presentation itself. Marty's going to take over a little bit here after our questions. We do have a little special for you related to DataMaster as well, but it doesn't matter if you want to try DataMaster out, you're still going to get the presentation and the question list that we had. So did we have any questions? How's everybody doing? Looks like we've got quite a few that have joined us. We might be able to unmute if there's anybody who wants to raise their hand. We may be able to. We have a little bit of time. I'm not seeing any questions coming through though, which is good. We've got some great appraisers that maybe understand this presentation. Hopefully it's organized in a way for you to really work through logically, step through and add value, create and see your value in the process and not somebody that just walks the house for 20-30 minutes and comes up with a value.
Mm-hmm. Right, and once you create that value, they typically contact you again and again to use your services, correct, Jared?
Yeah, great question there from Ken. Ken said, your last slide, why did you not include the realtor did not use similar comparables? So thank you, Ken. I probably didn't explain that as much. This is what the realtor is saying to the appraiser is, what is it about my transaction that did not meet your definition? My transaction did have all 5 of these, but you could also use it that way. I would, that'd be a great way to present it if you want to change this slide up a little bit and say, most of the time when I find there's a difference, it's because the CMA was flawed or, the pricing or some other component, and you can tie it back to that. So Ken, use that, and you can edit this slide when you get it. Use that slide the best way that you like to kind of finish up the presentation. But the idea here is that for them to understand that there's more than just a property that's priced higher or sold for more than your purchase price that's a comparable. And so great comment, great question there. Yeah, go ahead, Marty. You can move the slides around there.
Yeah.
Anybody else have any other questions? Again, my information's available on our website, and I'd be happy to put it in the chat as well.
And we will be sending out the recording of this presentation and also the slides that you can download and you can use for your own when you meet with brokers and realtors on your own.
Hey, Marty, I should say before you go into this part, we are planning 3 more of these this year, where we're going to have different presentations for you and different things to help you build your business. So please watch our emails for the announcements of those. Have we decided on the date of the next one, Marty?
I believe it's April 18th is our next Change the Score in 2024 presentation. And these are all about building your business and what you can do to build your appraisal business and make it make it work for you and make it benefit you. So these are not necessarily about the DataMaster product itself, but they are about appraisals and best practices and things like that. So if you go to this website, datamasterusa.com, you can try DataMaster Pro for free for 30 days. So you go in and enter your information and you can try DataMaster Pro for free and find out how we can make you even more efficient. And that's something else you'll be able to take to potential clients, is that you use the most advanced data management software out there. So and I see that Jared just put that into the chat box as well. So do we have any other questions or comments that we want to before we wrap up here?
Marty, I was just going to say thank you, Tammy, for your team and giving us the opportunity to come and get in front of your appraiser members. So thank you very much.
Thank you all for doing this. We appreciate it. And thank you to our appraiser attendees today. We appreciate you taking time to join us today.
I was wondering, is Randy still on with us, or Randy, did you jump off? I can't see you. There you are. So,
yeah, I'm here.
Maybe just Marty, real quick, Randy, what was, let me tell you, the panelists here, a little bit about Randy. Randy's joined the DataMaster team. Have you been with us a month now?
Not quite.
Not
Soon.
quite a month. Randy has a really exciting, I'm super excited to have Randy part of our team. He has been and still holds a broker's license in his hometown. He's also been on the lending side, looked at a lot of appraisals, built some great teams, and he's joined us just recently to help our product and to be part of our sales team. Randy, I was just wondering, you've seen this. This is the first time you've seen this. Put on your broker or your lender hat, and what would you think if an appraiser brought you this presentation and it was in front of one of your team members, one of your broker meetings?
I got one word for you, Jared, and that is credibility. Immediate, instant trust and credibility. You know, a lot of times we'll get an appraisal in and there's just nothing to do but scratch your head wondering what is going on with this appraisal. And this presentation shows me that if I gave you an order today, I'm going to get the right value, right, for the purpose of what we're doing. And I absolutely would trust you as an appraiser coming in and giving me that presentation. And in the level of detail, I'm sure that if we were in person and you were giving me that, you might even go a little bit further with some more anecdotes and some more stories about your experience. That is going to build immediate trust. And so often from the lender side, there's no face with a name. There is no idea of how trustworthy somebody is when they're going out there. Are they you know, are they cutting any corners? And listen, we want to trust everybody the same, but we definitely can see a level of credibility if you were to come in and show us your expertise and the technical information and how you're using software that supports and backs up every single box and number and everything on your forms is you can point to where you got that source. That's a huge benefit. And again, that's actually one of the reasons that I joined with DataMaster, is because I believe this is the #1 product out there. I've seen other products and they just don't go into the detail and depth. Honestly, probably the easiest way that you can build credibility is to show your source. And with our little right click, there's the source on any box. That's huge.
Yeah. So, well, thanks, Randy. Thank you. And you guys, go, have a great weekend. I know the basketball, some of us will be watching a little bit of basketball. And I don't know who your favorite teams are, but go team. I'm not as big of a basketball fan. I'm more in the cycling. I'm one of those crazy guys that goes and rides 100 miles every weekend, and
love it.
And so anyway, thank you guys so much for being here. Tammy, you can go ahead and close this out. I don't see any other questions, and I'm sure that excuse me, we'll get the recording to be able to distribute. So thank you.